Yes, indeed.
Well, what I wanted to go back to was when you just clicked in, one of the first things I said is it's still startling to see you without glasses because for the majority of the time I've known you, you and I have both worn glasses.
Agreed.
And I was like, and you started to tell the story. And I want you to go back into the story because I cut you off and said, I think the people watching might want to hear this story.
Well, I was working in Afghanistan. I worked in Afghanistan several years ago. I was there for about 3 years, and at one point, I think it was definitely in the summertime because things were more active then. It was in the summertime of 2012, I'd like to say. I was at Bagram Airfield, and I was living in a very small one room. Well, it was about 8 or 10 rooms in one building, but we got a less than 50 square feet. Prisoners are allowed 50 square feet of area, and we did not quite even get that much. But, it's very austere conditions, sleeping on a cot or in a sleeping bag or whatever have you, and using a cardboard box essentially as the nightstand on which I placed my phone and my glasses and things of this nature. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. The bad guys got a wild hair and decided to start chucking stuff over the walls that goes boom. And of course, when that happens, you got to get up and you got to go dive into a concrete bunker until they call the all clear. And then you can go back to bed or go to the shower and get ready to start your workday. And just as it happened, the sirens went off. Very 40s London, the big whale, the big air raid type of alert. So that's going to wake you up. Absolutely. I reached over to get my glasses and just completely aced them right off of that cardboard box that was serving as my nightstand at the time. And my glasses are gone in the dark somewhere. Can't see them. No idea. I'm searching around trying to find my phone so that I can use my phone's flashlight to find my glasses. At the same time, I'm supposed to be getting the hell out of there. And it was at that point I made the decision. Finally, I said, okay, that's it. That is a viable enough reason to go and get LASIK, because you and I had discussed it actually some years ago that we never, we just did not know the long-term effects of firing a laser into your eye.
Laser beam into your eye.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing.
Yes. And I was fairly reticent to do that kind of thing until that point. And I said, okay, that's it. So it was close enough. I said, yep, let's do that. I don't think that my life was any real danger in that particular situation, but it was one of those things of, when you think and you extrapolate of what could happen in the future, you know what, it's probably a good idea if I can see the moment my eyes snap open, because, my sight was quite terrible prior to getting the old bzz.
Well, yeah, man. I just the concept of hearing a bomb go off and then jumping over a barricade looking for glasses. I mean, for yours it was a lot more functional than it is for me. But
Right. Yes. Well, because I was very, very nearsighted, so I could see nothing. And I would have, I might have, injured myself just trying to find the damn bunker, because of course, there's very little light. You don't want to shed a lot of light on the base at night, because then that gives the opportunity for people who are lurking in the dark to see, aha, that's exactly where they are, or that's exactly where they congregate, and that kind of thing.
Oof. Yeah, like I said, that's not not that life for me. I personally, because my head's always been bald and I've always shaved my head and everything else, my glasses have probably been the only accessory that I'm allowed, with functionality. And so for me, it never bothered me. But for you in that situation, man, I can only imagine.
Yes, it was necessity. I could not drive without my glasses. I was that short-sighted.
No, you could not.
No, not
no,
at
you
all.
Could not.
And you know this.
Yeah. One of the things that just occurred to me as I was writing the description of this, I said, why don't more young men see the financial wisdom in the blue collar life? And it occurred to me, we're not young men anymore, so I should make that qualifier.
True enough, but that doesn't mean that we don't have wisdom that we can't impart.
Yeah. It's interesting because in our mind's eye, we go through different stages, and it's interesting to realize, that objectively we're not young anymore, even though in my mind's eye, I still look in the mirror and I see myself, in college.
Agreed.
And it's interesting until I look in the mirror and see this, or I look at your massive, might I say, impressive set of whiskers.
Well, actually, this is a great deal shorter than it was several months ago.
Really? What made you cut it down?
Well, I engaged in an experiment. I'd never had long hair in my life, and I decided one time I was going to have long hair, and so I started growing it. It took a couple of years, of course, and I let the beard grow out, at the same time, and would only go in for just very basic clips and trims to keep it healthy. And I said I want to have long hair one time in my life, and of course the natural question after that is, well, how long is long enough? And what I came up with was, well, as soon as it's long enough to donate, I'll go ahead and cut it off. So that was my goal. And Locks of Love, which is the charity that makes wigs for children and cancer patients and things of this nature, they say you have to have a 10-inch ponytail. So it has to be obviously the length required to go all the way back to that ponytail, and then 10 inches from there. So it took some while to do that, and the beard quite literally was, it was a good 4 inches longer than it is now, even though it's still quite full. And it was, I want to say, probably,
I want to make sure, if this is what we're talking about for people who want to know more about how to donate, I want to make sure I have the right place. Is this it?
I don't see it loading up just yet. Oh, it's slow, but yes, Locks of Love. This is exactly the place. There's also another outfit known as Wigs for Kids. Now, Locks of Love was the easiest one for me to donate to because it had the minimum threshold, because it had a 10-inch requirement, whereas Wigs for Kids, I believe, has a 15-inch requirement for the amount of hair that you can donate. So I think it's about 6 months ago, I went ahead and chopped it all off, and at the same time said, okay, take a few inches off of the old beard there, because I've had this fairly.
Wait, did you donate beard hair?
No, I donated my actual head hair, and it was long enough at that time. But
so there's no child walking around with a wig made out of your beard, right?
Oh, good Lord, no.
There's no child walking. Okay.
No,
that was arguably the premise for a horror movie: a child with a wig made out of your beard.
It could have been, but you know what? There may be an idea in there. There might be something, because beards. You might well find a decent application for essentially turning beard hair into eyebrows for people with alopecia.
Ooh. Is this it, by the way, on the screen?
Yes, it does look like it. Wigs for Kids. So yes, that's exactly right.
For anybody looking for something good to do.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we were initially talking
about wisdom that we were going to impart among young men. That's it. Well, yes. I want to tell you what made me say I wanted to talk to you, because I know a woman who is a recruiter in, I want to say, one of the Virginia areas, and she was complaining about this construction project that was at a dead stop. And I said, well, what's the problem? Is there not enough material? Blah, blah, blah. She said, no, we have 3 vacancies for high crane operators. I had to Google that. And apparently there aren't enough people who can do it. And my first thought was, wow, this must be some extraordinarily difficult 6-year degree to master. Because your degree, how long did it take you to study for your degree?
Well, technically, it's not a degree. Now, you can parlay it into perhaps an associate's degree, but generally speaking, the requirements more or less are about 4 years. Okay. Now, that's 4 years of OJT time.
On the job training,
time on the job, working with the tools, getting to know the systems and the rules and that sort of thing. And in a lot of places, they have an apprenticeship, which allows you to work at a 40-hour-a-week job or whatever have you. You go to school 1 day a week, and you go to school for 2 or 3 hours, and that runs similar to school,
right? That's for electricians.
That's right.
So that's what I was thinking for the high crane operator. Turns out high crane operator, it was something like in her state, and please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, it was less than 1.5 years of training, and the starting salary minimum was like $70-something thousand a year. And I said, so wait a minute, you don't even have to go to college for this. You could get out of high school, and by the time 20 years old hits, you're a young man. Let's just say the price you gave me was totally wrong, and they're only making $50,000 a year in a down economy. You're telling me a 20-year-old can walk out of the gate making that? She said, that's my problem. She said, she's got too many people who feel like if I don't go to school for, and you and I are college graduates, but the problem, she said, is that now you have people telling their children, if you don't go to school for all these years, get all this debt and get some kind of fancy degree, you're not going to be anything. And not enough men realizing, wait a minute, what if I just did this class, learned how to operate a crane and worked in a union for 20 years and retired at 40? And I'm thinking, well, this just seems like, and I'm going to play the race card here, especially in the Black community where you have so many people who can't afford the debt that comes with college. Where's the gap? Is that something that's happening in electricians? I mean, do you not see people?
Yes.
Where is this coming from? And how are we not getting more young men, Black, white, or otherwise, saying, why don't I just become this thing that's going to make me a lot of money in a career that clearly people are building stuff all over the world? I mean, you parlayed your education to traveling the world, making fairly high dollar amounts of money just by traveling to do what you could do anywhere in the world. I mean, where are we missing here? What are we doing? What's wrong?
First of all, let me put a little caveat in there. You're 99% correct. You and I both went to university, but only you graduated. I did not. However, I have been in the electrical and construction trade for 20 years. And now that's professionally. I actually learned it a great deal earlier because my father's an electrician. And so my apprenticeship, if you'll call it that, started when I was about 12 years old. So I've been in this trade for a very, very long time. And, one of the things that occurs to almost everybody immediately is image. Okay. Because electricity, or being an electrician, a carpenter, a plumber, a pipe fitter, a mason, a bricklayer, these are known as blue collar jobs. Right. And I understand the distinction between white collar and blue collar, and so do a lot of people out there. But there's also an inherent bias that comes along with white collar, blue collar, that seems to suggest that blue collar is in some social status less than white collar work. And unfortunately, that notion has prevailed for entirely too long, as far as I'm concerned. And there's only one person in the public eye that I can really call to mind that takes any of that very seriously. And that's Mike Rowe. So, when it comes to the trades, people immediately look down on that because they think, well, I have these lofty goals and notions, and it's part of the fulfillment of the American dream, as it were, quotes on that, of, I want to take over the world. I want to have the world by the ass, if you will, and be the big guy in the three-piece suit, very Gordon Gekko, as it were, and making those kind of decisions and not really caring about who turns on my lights every day, knowing that it's more than just me, because there's entire infrastructure there. So the problem is that, as I say, people look down on blue collar trades, and that is something that I believe is slowly starting to turn. The pendulum is slowly starting to swing in the other direction, but it's not rapid enough. And of course, you and I both know that innovation has two parents. There's necessity and there's urgency. And if those don't come together correctly, then innovation is either stymied or non-existent. And the innovation that's required as far as blue collar trades would be, trying to make it profitable to connect young people with these trades. Because, there's a hell of a sales pitch involved there. When you talk about white collar versus blue collar, you can understand that the ceiling, the white collar ceiling, is high, of course, because there's opportunities to do all kinds of things. But there are people, let's say successful attorneys, successful doctors. They've got a couple of $1 million in the bank. They're not hurting for anything or anybody. There's 12-year-old tech geniuses in Silicon Valley that can buy and sell them, a few times over. Right. So, the measure of success, I guess, is definitely relative. But people don't realize that the median income for blue collar work is actually higher than that of white collar work. And people don't necessarily understand this. Nobody has been
look at
clued
what
into
BK
this.
just said. Look at what BK said. He said, yep, I was told for many years to go to college to get a degree so I can get a job working for someone. No one ever spoke to me about going to college, being a business owner, unfortunately.
Yes, and that is a problem, quite obviously, because one of the things that is a sort of an ancillary benefit of having a blue collar work is that you can take the time, if you have the time, especially if you're young, you're single, or you just you have that kind of opportunity to not only work for someone making a decent wage, but also to start your own concern, a side hustle, if you will. And I know a great many people who do this. They apply the same skill set that they use 40 hours a week on their weekends and on their evenings, and they make a fairly decent amount of money doing that. And I think that it's laudable to do that, especially when you're young, when you have that kind of energy and that kind of time. As you get older, maybe you're a little bit more accustomed to sedentary time and that sort of stuff. And that's actually going to kind of segue into one of the other ancillary benefits of being a blue collar worker is you're not plugged into the job all the time.
What does that mean?
Because when you work with your hands, when that bell rings at the end of the day, when that whistle blows, you put your tools down and you go home. You don't have emails and phone calls chasing you the same way the white collar world does.
Yeah.
The white collar world says, I know you're there. I know that you're going to check your phone 4 times before you go to bed, and you're probably going to answer 2 or 3 emails just by instinct.
Yeah.
You're just, oh man, I got to do that. Shoot, I forgot to do that today. I really need to get to it. And people will do that. They'll get drawn into their position, their job, well after, the closing bell, if you will. Whereas if you work with your hands, the job's not going to come knocking. I'm not going to open up my door and see a bunch of electrical material outside going, hey, you haven't played with us in a few hours.
Can you come run some cable tonight?
Right, exactly. So you have the opportunity to, I guess what I would say is being unplugged from the job for a certain portion of your day contributes to the nouveau idea of the work-life balance. Now, that's not something that you and I necessarily grew up with, because we were raised in sort of a different ethic of just working all the time, shoulder to the wheel, nose to the grindstone, that sort of thing, so that you can provide for yourself and your family. And that's noble, that's laudable. There's nothing wrong with that. But people are far more concerned with living a more fulfilling lifestyle these days. And part of that is making sure that you don't have the job infringing on your private time. And so when you have that, as far as being able to put down the tools and unplug from the job, then you are the master of that free time. You can either choose to spend it with your family or whatever, but you can also choose to invest further in your own worth if you have a side hustle, if you've got a growing concern.
In the evening, you can take the craft that you learn, and then in the evening maybe study a MOOC course and figure out, how do I monetize that when I don't want to work for someone else anymore? How can I put myself out there maybe as let me back up for a second. You said Mike Rowe. Not a lot of people go into Mike Rowe.
Mike Rowe.
Hold on. Craig is a great guy. He's coming out to hang out and coming to Brazil with me as well. He's got a great deal of success behind him, and he said, great topic. We need to bust the stereotype associated with the trades. And Craig 100% is right.
Yes, indeed. That is absolutely true. Excuse me. So Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe had a couple of television shows on American television. The most popular one that people would recognize was called Dirty Jobs. And Mike Rowe would go and he would participate in jobs that are considered particularly dirty. And it's jobs where there's a certain amount of filth, if you will, involved. But it's people that are he would showcase and highlight not only the work necessary, but also the people, the quality of individuals that were doing this work. and trying to bust that stereotype, as your friend was just commenting, about doing those jobs that most people consider beneath them. The kind of jobs that support the infrastructure on the back of which our society perches. And I would say
Mike Rowe with Oscar the Grouch talking about dirty jobs.
Yes, absolutely. Oscar the Grouch lived in a trash can. So, you know, that actually the perfect Muppet to get together with Mike Rowe. But he's the only one that I know of in the public eye, let's say, that's actually taking that seriously and trying to swing that pendulum the other way and say, listen, you know, okay, let's take this for example. You're going to pay 30 grand for a trade school. And that's if you pay for it on your own. There are so many outfits and organizations out there in the modern day. If you're working for them, they will pay for your school. They will pay for that trade school. So that $30,000 becomes a great deal less. It takes some dedication. It takes some time, of course. It does take about 4 years. You do have to donate one night a week to make sure that this is taken care of. And you have to take it seriously, just like anything else, really. But versus 150?
Yeah.
Is that the median debt now incurred by a college student? 150K?
And you're not even talking about top tier colleges. You're talking about, I mean, I went to New Mexico State College for my second degree, and it was like a couple of years later, I managed to pay that off. And it was just like, even then, it was just a portion of my salary. But now, I mean, I have younger cousins who are at odds with me because I'm always talking about, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. And they said, well, why? It's not the way it was when you were a young man. You know, now I'm looking at, and I had to really take some time to listen, put my ears on and do some research because I thought, no, they're just being lazy. And the information was coming back to me is I'm asking these young men to get saddled with debt that will cripple them for the rest of their life.
Yes.
You know, I know a young man, not much younger than you or I, who has just graduated from an amazing medical school with all kinds of bells and whistles, who cries at night. Right. It'll be years, maybe a decade, before he makes a profit on his education.
Yes, and that's difficult, especially when you're considering that, you know, your average adult these days actually, if I remember correctly, has, I want to say, 3 careers in their working life. Careers. Now, these are completely separate endeavors. And in those careers, you could have 2 or 3 jobs. Now, of course, obviously, you know, this individual, he's very well invested in that one skill set and is more than likely to stick with that. But, you know, how many people do you know that went to school for one thing and are doing something completely different?
Yeah, totally different.
You know, my wife, perfect example, archaeologist, you know, and, you know, doesn't even get into that anymore, you know, other than conversationally. You know, so there's a lot of people out there that they go to school for one thing because they think this is what I want to do. This is the endeavor that I want to get into. And then they go out into the working world and they find out, wow, this is not Indiana Jones.
Wow.
Okay.
I refrained from making any Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider jokes. You see, that was beneath me. I said, I'm not going to touch it. That's low-hanging fruit.
Yes. Well, true enough, but I can do that. I'm sort of grandfathered in. But so working back to the trades, there's some stability there that I think that people don't necessarily pick up on. And there's also some trends that are going on. I mean, we're talking, I've read a few articles recently and they range anywhere from about 53 to 60% of electricians. I'm talking about a singular trade now. I'm not talking about every trade, but electricians, there's anywhere from 53 to 60% of them are over the age of 45.
Huh.
So that means that the large portion of that workforce is going to be looking to retire within the next generation. You and I both know that baby boomers are retiring in droves. Over the next 2 years, probably 2.5 million baby boomers in the United States are going to retire. And there are not enough young people to fill those slots. Okay. And once again, you know, going back to what I was talking about, the infrastructure on which our society is perched, and I say perched because it's definitely not a rock solid basis. The infrastructure, Yes, precariously perched, as it were. They only got about 3 toes on. So our infrastructure in the United States, between roadways, sewage systems, electrical grids, and things of this nature, is aging. And it's aging at a rate that is faster than the maintenance personnel can keep up with.
That. Wow.
That's right. And so that's where I think that we're going to see what we talked about, or we touched on a moment ago, of, not only necessity, but urgency. That is the perfect storm.
Now,
that
I want you to
is
give
that
me that
marriage.
quote again. Give me that, what it's born of, you said.
Innovation has 2 parents. Yeah. And those 2 parents are necessity and urgency.
Now, is that a Pat original or?
It's a derivation. Okay. It's a derivation. I believe I've read something to that effect before, so I'm obviously not doing a direct quote, but it is a bit of a derivation, because I believe the last time I read something about innovation, it said the father or the mother of innovation is urgency. But there's also that necessity as well. So it's a Pat special, but it's sort of a remix of well-known wisdom. But anyway, so all of that being said, there's really not going to be a great push to connect young people with these blue-collar jobs until we see a little bit more urgency, or until somebody figures out a way to monetize connecting those people with those jobs, because that's the big thing. If there's money to be made, then that will definitely happen. But we'll see, I'm sure, probably in the next 5 years or so, we'll start to see a little bit of a slowdown in the construction trade. Whereas,
where does that come from? Where does that gut feeling come from?
Well, it comes from some conversations that I've had with people that I work with, and there's some metrics out there in the market that say, okay, well, these projects that are planned 4 and 5 years in advance, they're still a go. More than likely, they're going to turn everything over with that, and it's going to keep going. There may end up being, in the next, let's say, 5 to 6 years, a bit of a slowdown in the new construction side of things. However, I would venture to say that probably in the next 15 years or so, you're going to start seeing more and more of a focus on infrastructure. Like we talked about, it's aging faster than we can do anything about it. And that's going to become someone's problem soon. And when it starts becoming the problem of the average American, they're going to make the phone call and say, hey, you in a big chair, you've got some explaining to do. Why did you not see this coming? Why did you not prognosticate, 12 years ago that this was going to happen, and start putting some programs in place? Bring shop back to high school. Metal shop, wood shop, auto shop.
There is a man named Dr. What's his name? He's a professional clinical psychologist, sociologist for children. And let me type in his name real quick. I'm trying to remember his name. Come on. And I can remember all of his. There it is. His name is Umar Johnson. He's a very polarizing figure. He's one of those guys that 50% of the time he's preaching wisdom that everyone should live by, and the other 50% of the time he is batshit crazy.
Okay.
But one of the things that he brought up, he said, what happened? When did America make the decision to take away the ability for an 18? He said when his parents were in school, most of the inner city kids that knew college was not an option for them had choices. He said his mother grew up in a world where at 18 years old, when she graduated high school, she was a registered nurse. Mm-hmm. He has uncles that graduated as, I don't know the levels of auto mechanic, but whatever that first level is, they had done that because in shop, they had been doing all of that. So when they graduated, they had a job. They had guys that were learning electrician. So when they left, they could go right into an internship, all kinds of things. And he said, at what point did the United States make the conscious decision to say, we are going to remove all that? We're going to make sure all those trades that we're going to make sure, particularly people who did not come from wealthy families, not going to have that opportunity anymore. When did that happen?
It's because the American people fell in love with their own myth. That just from a little bit of hard work and a little bit of know-how, that you could catapult yourself to the top of the financial strata, as it were, and that working with your hands is not necessarily something you want to do. You want to be involved with the latest, greatest. You want to be involved with that innovation, the newest thing. And that's why there are so many engineers and programmers and things like that out there. And, I remember in 2010, there were people that I knew with bachelor's degrees wrangling buggies at Walmart. And, my poor, humble, blue-collar act was admittedly in a fairly dangerous place, but I was, I'm on 140 a year.
Yeah, that's the thing. You chose to live in danger to make 140 a year. What if you get somebody like me who is I'm allergic to violence and bombs? So maybe I stayed in the United States and I settled. I settled for the 80.
But it could be, you could do quite well off of an 80 if you worked in an area where the union presence is quite strong and you worked with the union. I do have some issues with unions as far as, them being top heavy in recent years. And of course, even union people will tell you, boy, we've had some people looking after our what do I want to say, retirement programs that have just been,
terrifying.
Horrible. For us in the long term, all sorts of embezzlement and things of this nature. But somebody could go and work for the union and make a damn fine middle class living, which allows them to put a roof over their head and provide for their family. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't recognize: after you've been established in a trade for a while, you get to a certain level of income wherein you can travel back in time 50 years.
What do you mean?
You can be a one-income household as a blue-collar worker.
So you're telling me that all the men that I know that wish they could go back to a time when their wife was just able to stay at home with the kids, but that's impossible now. You're saying that the way to do that might not be through $200,000 in debt, but maybe just working with your hands. That's blasphemy, Patrick. That's blasphemy.
Yes, I know it is. But as I touched on before, the median income for blue collar is actually higher than it is for white collar workers. Now I know there's always going to be people who say, well, that doesn't apply to me because I'm better than that. Because they were raised to think that they were better than something like working as an auto mechanic, which people, you and I know what's the classic term for auto mechanic? Grease monkey.
A grease monkey? I was going to say a wrench, perhaps.
That's the classic term for an auto mechanic.
Right.
Now, if you were to go to a trade school and learn how to be a diesel engine mechanic, you could be making six figures inside of half a dozen years.
Wow.
That's the kind of thing that people don't understand because, let's figure the internal combustion engine doesn't just run our personally owned vehicles. It runs the shipping, the trucks that obviously are the backbone of the shipping industry. Generators run on diesel engines, backup generators for things like hospitals. Yep. These have to be kept in good working condition, and there have to be people who can work on these things and have that skill set and the opportunity for people to be more important, I guess, in the general equation, if they're willing to get out there and just work a little bit more and a little bit harder than the average guy to go out in let's say the middle of the snowstorm to repair that generator, as opposed to a beautiful sunny day. That has a trade-off there, obviously. That if you're willing to sacrifice a bit more yourself as far as making sure that the job is brought off well, then the other side of that coin is the compensation is better and the potential is better in the future.
A name, and I don't know if you know who this guy is. He's done some side acting. He's most famous for his podcast. Dante Nero runs Man School. He was a protege of a famous comedian Patrice O'Neill. His name is Dante Nero, and he's a stand-up comedian. Remember? You ever
I'm familiar. Let me say I'm familiar with the name. I would know Patrice O'Neill far better than Dante Nero, but I have heard the name a few times. I would not say that I'm familiar with his work, to be honest with you. However, I'm at least familiar on yes, I recognize his name.
Now, here's what's interesting about him. He has this podcast, talks about all manner of things that could be considered controversial by some. And someone asked him one day, they said, well, wait a minute, how is it that you have a professional career, yet you say all these things that get so many other men fired? And then, what do you do for a living? And he drives a really luxurious car. He has all of his clothes are custom made. He's a sewer worker, proud union sewer worker. He says, I don't think what you people understand is that I'm a union sewer worker who's been working for I don't know how many years. He's, his level of income affords him a lifestyle that people are angry that they're like, wait a minute, you're a sewer worker? He's like, absolutely. He tells stories about things he's done. And he's like, you people don't seem to understand. I'm a union sewer worker that's been working for I forgot how many years. His level of income affords him not just the money, but security that allows him to be who he wants to be. So he can do stand-up comedy at night. He can tell horrible jokes that people don't find funny. He can give controversial advice about women, but he's a union employee who's in long and in good standing.
Yes. And that's huge. I mean, as I said, I do have my peccadillos when it comes to the unions, and I've never actually worked in a union myself, so I'm definitely an outsider when I speak about them. But they definitely take care of their people. Now, I do think that they have some hard times ahead, given that they are like any other organization, and the demographics are the same for them as they are for the normal society. They've got a lot of baby boomers that are about to be retiring. And there's going to have to be a lot of youngsters coming into the union to, continue making the union money so that they can pay out all of those old timers who are retiring. Because let's face it, they're going to have to be, taking care of that burden for a little bit of time. And not all of them have the financial wherewithal to do so, given what we touched on earlier about, some malfeasance and embezzlement and things of this nature that had gone on in the past, which, everybody wants to say things like the mob, right? Always the mob, and trust me, I don't want to piss off the mob. But they're not big here in Denver, I don't think.
Or they're so big you don't see them.
Right. That could be it. They maybe traded in the $1,200 Valentino suits for something else, an invisibility cloak, if you will. Who knows? But I think Dante Nero is exactly correct. That people do not understand how much of life it's gotten to the point, honestly. I mean, of course, I engage in a bit of hyperbole here, but it's very Eloy Morlock. It's very Wells. It's the Time Machine, that you have this blue collar society that makes everything work, makes everything run, and then you have a white collar society that says, if I plug this thing into the wall, magic should work and make me happy.
Yes.
And there is a mutual disdain between both sides of that equation, because people who are in the white collar world say, oh, they're not our sort, Martha. We should not be associating with those people because they work with their hands for a living. As such, they are less educated, they are less cultured, and in summation, not worthy of our time or attention or compassion. And then you have the blue collar world looking at the white collar world saying, these people not have any idea how to do anything. They cannot do anything beyond replace the light bulb, perhaps jiggle the handle. That's it.
My favorite, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are anecdotes just hither and yon about the the complete lack of knowledge. And most of your listeners probably, know what a tower computer is, the old desktop type of computer where you had the monitor out on your desk and you've got the tower either below the desk or in a closet or in some cabinet somewhere. And there's that old anecdote about the woman who was calling up technical support and said, yeah, my coaster's broken. And the man on the other end said, excuse me? She said, yeah, my coaster's broken. What coaster? She said, when I come in the morning, I press this button on my computer and a little coaster slides out and I put my coffee in there. So she was using the disk drive, the CD-ROM drive, as a coffee coaster or cup holder. So it's that kind of thing. Obviously,
right.
I'm trying to use something, a little bit more across the board that everybody would understand. But the blue collar world looks at the white collar world with that same kind of disdain of, do you even understand anything about the struggle of life? And can you do anything for yourself? Can you change your own tire? Can you do anything beyond flipping the switch on and off and saying, okay, it's busted. I've got to call somebody. It made a spark. I'm leaving now. Call me when it doesn't do that anymore.
Well, get this. Do you remember my house in Vegas when I called you over and I was like, hey, there's something off about the switch? And you were like, well, what kind of switch is it? And I was like, I don't know. And then you realized that my house had been wired like upside down or something. And you actually pointed out to me, you said this wasn't done by a licensed electrician. And that's something I didn't know when I bought the house because everything worked. I just couldn't understand why when I pressed this button here, the light over there would go off and on, and then there was it was just weird. And
yes.
You actually imparted that wisdom to me. You said this wasn't done by a licensed electrician who knows what they're doing.
That's right.
Wow. And you actually scared me because you said, if this is something we can see that's wrong, what's inside your wall? And I'm like,
correct.
Terrified.
And that's obviously a risk that's involved in that industry, is that, because there are not enough qualified people, you start getting people who are not qualified. And the threshold of what employers are willing to put up with, as it were, or willing to overlook as far as qualification set or lack thereof, more specifically, that line starts to get blurred a great deal, because if they don't have the people, they don't have a company, because they can't get the contracts. They can't get the work if they don't have the workforce to staff the contracts that they have. And so those people who are less qualified, who come in and say, oh yeah, I've been doing this for years. Okay, well then show me your apprenticeship certificate. Oh, well, we didn't do an apprenticeship where I come from. Oh, okay, well then show me your license from the place that you were. Oh, well, we didn't do licenses. Okay.
Yeah,
but I've got all my own tools, oh, well, I need people, so I guess that's it. And that kind of thing happens. There's that trade-off, that employers are just as culpable as the people who are trying to lie their way onto the job, with saying, yep, we'll absolutely look the other direction. And anybody who knows anything about the crash, or irresponsible Wall Street practices and things of this nature knows that there were people who were imminently aware of what was going on but chose to look the other way. And when you're personally vested in the endeavor, then the incentive to look the other way gets a lot closer to home, because there are people who still want to be able to run their company next week. And how do they do that? Sometimes it's by making that trade-off and saying, yep, okay, I'm going to have to hire somebody who's less qualified, but they interviewed well, and maybe I can train them. And as when it starts out, it comes from a good place, because the company owner says, yeah, this guy's got potential. I can train him. I can put him with one of my more experienced guys, and I can train him up, and he's going to be rock solid. He's going to put out a good product for me. He's going to be proud. I'm going to be proud. Everything's going to go wonderfully. And then the experienced guy leaves, and the next less experienced guy becomes responsible. And that just keeps going. And there's a snowball effect to the point where, if you really aren't careful and you don't watch out what you're doing, you will have the blind leading the blind, as it were. You'll have people misinforming one another as far as how to do the job, who have absolutely no idea. It's like a group of 12-year-olds completely lying to one another about sex behind the barn, because nobody knows. Not at that age. They have no idea, and they don't know what they don't know. They just want to seem important to their friends.
Yeah, they want to sound important. They want to sound cool. They don't want anyone to think there's something they don't know.
Correct.
So when it says, "Oh yeah, it's totally cool to stick a fork into that little thing on the wall,"
absolutely.
Over.
Yes, and that can have some very serious repercussions. Obviously, you have to take these things very seriously, but once you know the rules, it's very difficult to get hurt. And it's something you and I touched on actually some years ago. I do still remember this conversation of scuba diving. We talked about people that had been killed scuba diving.
Yeah, I like scuba diving. People who don't know, I like scuba diving.
Yes, it's you and I had both spoken about it because we're both scuba divers, and knowing what you have to know as safety protocols and procedures to engage in that sport. Once you know what all of that is, it has to be an absolutely perfect storm of horrible situations that occur in order for you to get injured or killed, or you have to have completely ignored one of the primary precepts of what it means to scuba dive safely.
Yes.
You have to have ignored a safety check, or said, I don't have to look at my watch and calculate my dive time or my decompression stop or anything of this nature. I'm just going to go because I don't want to be fussed. I do not want to be bothered with all of that inane safety crap.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people they're surprised. I remember the first day of class when we were all looking at equipment, a guy came in and he had this state-of-the-art thing for his wrist, another one for his chest. And I'll never forget, the dive master said, "Man, you are really committed to this." He said, "Yeah, I am." He says, "I hate to tell you this, young man, but you're going to have to take all that stuff, put it back in your car." And he says, "But why? I just bought this supercomputer for this, and it's going to tell me this." And this. No. Until you learn how to read your charts with just a pencil and a piece of paper and take all your stuff on and off, just with no extra aids. He's like, you can't use that stuff. It's kind of like you have to learn how to shoot with an iron sight gun before I let you have this laser scope, which isn't going to make you better. It just makes you a really expensive rifle.
Yes, and it makes you, but it gives you background. It gives you history. It gives you knowledge. And all those young people out there that might be listening or tuning in some way, shape, or form, if you don't know how to use a slide rule, that's a problem. It could be a problem in the future because, that TI 85, or my God, it was TI 85, 20 odd years ago. It's probably the TI 1006 by now. That graphing calculator that you got to use for your high school math, that was all based on the slide rule. That's the calculator of old. The United States put men on the moon using slide rules. So, we are capable of far more than people give themselves credit for, or even, even the rest of the world. And I get it. We're kind of aging a little bit. And one of the things that people do as they age, they start to get this bias toward the younger generation. Our damn kids, they don't have no discipline. They don't know how to work. They don't know what a work ethic is. And here's the thing. That's actually true, but not 100% true. Because every generation wants to do its best to make sure that the next generation has an easier time than they did. That's noble. That's laudable. And it's basic human instinct. But in so doing, you remove valuable lessons from the times that these kids, they don't get. They do not get the opportunity to experience hardship, to experience things. And of course, I don't want to get into a big, huge societal commentary, but it does sort of dovetail into the trades a little bit, because I see a lot of youngsters coming up. They want it all and they want it now. And it's like, listen, you are not Freddie Mercury. This is not Queen. And you can't just sing a song, have a montage as it were, of you learning the trade, and all of a sudden you're a foreman. No, that takes time. You have to tick the box before you can
be. It's like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. People will come in every now and then. There's a guy that says, "How long until I'm a black belt?" to one of the coaches, and the coach will be like, depends on if you come to class every day and you're willing to bleed. I can't help you.
Exactly.
Look at what Kenna says now. Kenna is one of those smart people. Hold on. Tell us how smart you are and what you do at Ken. I don't even want to begin to describe her job, but she could probably take a slide rule and build you something really clever with it.
Oh, I'm sure. Now, let me ask you a quick question here. My battery's getting a little bit low here. Do you have the opportunity to freestyle for a couple of minutes while I go get my cord, or shall we cut this short and maybe do a part 2 at some point?
You know what? That's what I was going to say. Let's do a part 2. You don't want to give them all the candy at once, but and you also, I hope that you can come into some of my group chats as well, because I don't want to get too high on my own, group of friends that are here with me. I have to remember I have this large, diverse group of people that I can hang out with, and maybe one day we can get a third amigo to be on with us. I'm going to send him a message,
and that would be fantastic, because you know what?
Fantastic.
We need the opportunity to not only have another opinion, but also to have a differing opinion.
Yes.
If there is someone such who would say, "Wait a minute, hang on, I'm gonna take up, just let's say, devil's advocate for a moment, and say, all right, I'm going to take the stance that the other way is, the going to college, incurring that debt, let's say, is more valuable because of the network opportunities or whatever have you." I would love to hear the arguments from that side of the fence, because I think for so long the trades have just not gotten a lot of play. They've not gotten a lot of press. They like to be marginalized. People like to say, you know what, I'm not going to be a plumber. I'm not going to be a plumber because you deal with sewage, you deal with feces. Oh my God. I can't stand that. But it takes all types. Some people are equipped to work with blood and other such things in the medical trade, and some people are not. The same thing is true of the traditional trades.
Pat, it looks like you have a fan. She said, listen, Kenna said, I want you to keep talking for a few more minutes, because her dad was a blue collar man. And I said, I'm going to send you a link. So Pat, go get your cord. It looks like the crowd wants more. Okay. So.
Okay. You'll have to give me a couple minutes. I'll be right back.
Okay. And Kenna, what I'm going to do for you right now is I am going to send you a link to come up to the big house and chat with us. It's always a pleasure to have you around. I always try to make the things I talk about with people fairly diverse. I want the people that I talk to have lots of different opinions about lots of different things. And I think Pat is one of those overlooked gems in my life. He's a dear friend, and his life path brought him a lot of success, despite him saying, what, I didn't finish the college. I just decided to go ahead into my electrician. And his success in life has been, let me see, where is it? There we go. And Kenna, please check your email. It looks like BK wants us to keep the conversation going. So we're gonna stay on a little while longer. Normally I try to keep these things to about an hour, because let me see, for people attention spans, and I'm also someone who wants to make sure everybody comes back for more. But when I have somebody like this that everybody enjoys talking to, and people like Kenna want to join up with us, more than happy to keep the party going. Let's see, I got a couple other people. Boom, boom, there we go. And Kenna, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to tag you here on Facebook. Here we go. So you can share this. Let's see. You're on your computer, you're on the computer and not your tablet anymore, right?
Right. Yes, I am on my laptop, which I, just for ease of use, I went ahead and hardwired into the internet, as opposed to relying on my admittedly unreliable
anymore, right?
Wi-Fi signal.
Kenna, turn off the volume on YouTube. Click the mute button on YouTube so you can only hear me through here. Otherwise, we'll get feedback.
As opposed to relying.
You see?
Yes. So I heard myself. Yeah. Yes.
So she's got to go ahead and click mute. And are we there? Testing 1, 2. All right. So yeah, it looks like I think you hooked her with that slide rule. I think that's how you got a new friend. You were like, she said slide rule, and her ears perked up. She said, "Did he say slide rule?"
Yes, absolutely. The old slide rule. But the tools of the trade, whatever that trade be, there's a constant curve of innovation and things of this nature that goes on. But there are people that say the old ways are the best, the old tools are the best, and there is definitely some truth to that. In that, the tools that people used to use, many years ago, were just as viable as the ones are today. Maybe not just as easy to use. And a perfect example is in the modern day, in the electrical trade, and in so many other trades, we use lasers. We use lasers to show what is level, what is plumb, what is square.
What does that mean? What is plumb?
Plumb would be vertically level, top to bottom. Okay, so if you're level this way, this is known as level. Vertically, right, you would be known as plumb. Am I directly underneath the spot that I want to be? For instance, okay, taking a look at this light over my head here. All right, if I wanted to make sure that was exactly center of the room, I would take a measurement and I would make a point on the floor. In the modern day, we put a laser on that point and it shines up and shows me where exactly I should install the fixture in the ceiling. Now, this is a new innovation in the last several years. The old school tool that used to be used is called a Plumb Bob. Essentially, it's a brass weight on the end of a string, because gravity is plumb. Gravity is does not have level issues. Yes, exactly. And so I've actually done this with a few of the kids that I've worked with in recent years. I'll hand them this bale of string with a brass weight on the end of it, and they say, "What is this?" I say, "It's an analog laser." That's how we used to do things in the old days. That's how you find plumb.
Am I looking at
have a laser?
Now?
Yes, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So you would hold this and you would move it ever so slightly until the tip of the Plumb Bob rests immediately over your mark, and then okay, where I've got my finger on the string up top, that's exactly where that should be. So it takes a few more seconds, it takes a few more steps, but it's still possible, it's still doable, and you don't necessarily have to have the latest and greatest innovation or invention to do a quality job.
So, Kenna, tell us what made you want to join the team, because
what?
A lot of people know who you are, but tell us who you are for the people who don't know.
I'm Keno Williams from Keno Williams LLC, and I just happened to join you guys tonight because I saw you were talking about blue collar. I was like, hey, let me click on this to see what's really going on with blue collar tonight. And I checked in probably about 10 minutes ago, and I was like, hey, my dad was a blue collar man.
Nice. That's wonderful. What was his trade? What did he do?
Well, he was a CNC machinist at a medical company, and he worked there for probably 35 years or so. Blue collar worker. These were the times where people were getting gold watches back in the day. So I just remember that's the way we were raised. My father was blue collar. My mother she had the college degree. So a little bit different there. So I'm just curious to find out what you guys were talking about in regards to blue collar workers.
Well, what we were saying earlier, we really addressed how many vacancies there are that are coming in the blue collar world, and how so many people. Before we get too far down the road, everybody, at some point when we're finished with this, I want you to go back And I did a great conversation with Kenna. If you look on your screen, we call it dual citizenship and a second passport, how Kenna gets it done. Kenna is a globetrotter and a world reaver, and she does a lot of really cool things that may not necessarily be related now, but I want everyone to go back and watch that video. So there we go. But what we were saying was that how difficult it is when you have so many situations now where there are people who would rather take on $200,000-$300,000 in debt as opposed to, what'd you say, Pat? A $30,000.
Yeah, roughly 30K if you were paying for it by yourself, and a great many outfits nowadays will actually sponsor you so that they will actually reimburse you for your trade school. So you have to pay that cost initially, but as long as you achieve a minimum GPA each semester, they will reimburse you that money.
Wow.
In addition, you are actually working 40 hours a week or more while doing this, so earning an appropriate living. Now, when you're starting off, it's not fantastic. I mean, you're not knocking it down. When you're young and you really want to have a lot of extra money, you're not really necessarily doing that. But I know some just crackerjack individuals, youngsters. One that I worked with a couple of years ago, who as an apprentice took the learning of the trade very seriously, and not only the learning of the trade, but the learning of the industry. And he just, I want to say within the last 6 months, has gotten his journeyman electrical license and is already a field supervisor. He already has, basic perks like a company vehicle, where, he doesn't have to have his own vehicle. He's 20, I want to say 23, maybe 24 years old.
23 years old. How much do you think this guy, minimum? Give me a minimum what this kid's pulling home.
Ooh, well, let's see. I would say probably 63, 65 a year. 65 now that's minimum. Now that's if you're that's Monday through Friday. That's weekends off. That's federal holidays, etc. and so forth.
Now, what time do you think he gets home? Monday through Friday. What time do you think he's getting home? Bringing 60 a year. What time is he getting home for dinner?
Probably working 6 to 2:30. He's home by 3:30. Done.
What? Again, Patrick, you speak blasphemy. How come nobody told us?
Hey, I need this information for my nephew right now.
Yes, well, people don't necessarily understand. They don't get it. They don't understand how potentially, I don't want to say lucrative in a way that gives people the wrong idea that you can take over the world just by being somebody who works with their hands. But you have so many benefits with that trade knowledge that allow you to make a good living, and it allows you to make a good living anywhere you go, because electricity doesn't change. Electricity is the same. Even if you go overseas, the principles remain the same. So that trade knowledge, that skill is valuable wherever you go. The other ancillary benefits, like we've already touched on, is being able to unplug from that job, put the tools down, go home, watch your kids' basketball game, or catch, whatever you want on the television, and not worry about work, because work is not pecking at you. Because the construction site is not going to email you. The construction site is not going to text message you late at night. So you have that work-life balance that people seem to find so very valuable these days. And I don't mean to say that with any sort of disdain whatsoever. I do come from a little bit older tradition where, somebody said this to me a few years ago, and my wife absolutely hates to hear it, but it is kind of true. He said, you know what? Work is your first wife. And I thought, well, okay, yeah, there is some truth to that, because I've always been about the job. I've always been, one of those that has been dedicated to the job, to the image of not only myself, but the outfit that I'm working for and things of this nature. And so I don't necessarily understand as well as definitely the younger generation and even other people of my contemporaries, that whole work-life balance. But I am smart enough to know that it is definitely something that is in the equation. And when people can work 2080, which, 2080 work hours in the standard American work year, considering Monday through Friday, federal holidays off, etc., that with just working that, you can make a decent living, but still have enough time and also the budget to do things that make you a more complete person. That's not lost on me. It's something that I don't experience as much as others, but I understand its significance. And one of the things that that you can look at, if let's say you're an American, you don't like to travel much, you want to kind of stay home, maybe not necessarily the world travelers that we see here in this particular conversation. If you do something where you can telecommute, your job can be outsourced. And that is something to remember in the future, that your job can go elsewhere. If you don't have to show up to do your job, then the other guy doesn't have to show up to do your job, but can also do it just as well, perhaps. Whereas you're not going to outsource the high school that you're building, because that high school's got to stay there in that neighborhood. And people have to show up to that job every day and do that job. Okay, so that's one thing that people think about when they think about, the machines are coming for our jobs, or, other people, you talk about all these jobs being outsourced to Southern Asia, the Philippines, these places, and people are worried about that kind of thing. Okay, I get it. You want a little bit more security? Have a job where you have to show up every day, where you have to be there, or otherwise it doesn't get done. And for people who would like to stay fit, there's more physical activity involved with your average work day when it comes to blue collar work. You don't have to find an extra 2 hours in your day to go to the gym after you've already worked a 12-hour day behind a desk when you work with your hands for a living. So those are ancillary benefits that people don't necessarily take into account, but if you really drill down into it, they are part of the equation. Does that make sense?
That's wisdom that I don't think people are ready for.
They may not be. They may not be. But you know what? There's going to have to be, the pendulum has got to swing back in the other direction. Like we talked about, bringing back shop class. You have to have that. People need to understand that there's a good living to be made, and there's definitely a pride of ownership as well. You've got a lot of people out there who they conduct business all day, but they essentially make nothing. They do nothing. They simply deal in intangibles. Yet I can drive into downtown and say, you see that 18-story building right there? My sweat, my work, my brain power, and the dedication of my team, the guys that I worked with who believed in me, supported me, and showed up to work every day. We are responsible for that building. We made that happen. We made that happen from a big hole in the ground. Nothing. And now it's an 18-story building. So there is that pride of ownership as well, to be able to say, I made that.
Wow. Kelly, you talked about someone in your life that this information might be valuable for. No need to give names, but tell us tell us something about him. Tell us some of the information that you think might help him. What kind of questions we can answer for you.
Well, based off what Patrick was saying, I think that this is something we'll probably do very well for a young person. I can say who it is. Actually, my nephew. He's pretty young. Just graduated from high school a few months ago. He's been looking into other programs as well. So I'm thinking that something like this may be something that interests him. So I will have to talk to him and ask him if this is something that he's interested in, because he likes to work with his hands. He's talked about doing similar type of jobs. So had I known that something like this was available, I could have, given him this information, but I didn't think about it, because I don't know if you guys have talked about this earlier. I think a lot of parents push college on kids, and it may not be that they want to go, where they can maybe go to a trade school, learn something that is valuable, that allows them the opportunity to make a honest living, a fair living, and a good living as well. Like I mentioned earlier, my father was a blue collar worker. He was a CNC machinist. My family, we never went without anything. Everything was fine. He did a really good job at the job he had. He was there for 35 plus years, and it was a good career for him. So this is something that, you know, I think that my nephew will probably be able to benefit from this. He's pretty young. I think he's 18, 19 years old, and he's young enough where this is something where he could go to school, learn, and make a difference.
Well, I would agree with that. I would agree. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Watt. I'll take.
And I gotta say this while it's fresh off my brain. If he's 18 or 19 years old, you got to get him now.
Yes, that's why he's so young.
You can't let another. You need to impress upon him and everyone in his life. He's got to get into something formal, some kind of a path in life now. Because if he doesn't have a direction at this age, it's going to become normal for him to not be doing anything, and that's a disastrous path. Mm-hmm. That is the ruinous path. Second, and this is the torch that I'm going to hand off to Patrick, off screen, if we could give him your information, Patrick, would you mind having a phone conversation with this young man? If the situation warranted it, if he was interested, could I ask him to call you and just talk to you and pick your brain?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, well, you and I both know I love the sound of my own voice. And I don't lack for you know, anecdotes or details or, you know, glib repartee, as it were. You know, verbal pyrotechnics are kind of the milieu that I live in.
That's why I love you so much, brother. Verbal pyrotechnics. I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah, well, it's good. But yeah, I would say definitely he should be on board, and I would push for something even a little bit further beyond that, just on a societal level. I would say that, like a country like China, which has mandatory military service from every one of its citizens, every last one, that gives them at least some basic level of training and knowledge. I would say that something similar would be beneficial to American or even, you know, other Western societies as well, because, and I'll use myself as an example. My father, an electrician, worked in the white collar world after getting out of the Navy, and at one point around 1989 or 1990, the issue that, or the avenue that he was pursuing at the time, that white collar avenue, actually dried up where we were living, and he found himself without a job and without the opportunity to get something comparable. And so he returned to a blue collar skill set and was able to continue, you know, contributing to the household budget and that sort of thing. And that was something that he impressed upon me as a young person. He said, "Son, go get your license, learn the electrical trade, go get your license, and then keep it in your wallet. If you want to go out and do this and become an engineer and do all these kind of, you know, lofty things that, you know, that everybody as a teenager has notions of doing, then you can. But if anything ever goes wrong, you can always go pick up your tools and keep yourself fed, clothed, housed, and you can do okay for yourself." I was halfway through college, ran out of money, and not really a big fan of incurring debt. And so at that time, I actually made a conscious decision, because, you know, obviously university was cheaper back when we were going, Watt, but still, I was not enamored of the idea of incurring further debt for an education. And so for me, I said, okay, let me take a little bit of time and go out into the work world and just see what's out there. I can always return. It's not like school's going anywhere. It doesn't have an expiration date. I can always go back. And when I got out into the working world, I found that there were opportunities to be had. And there were opportunities that agreed for, you know, it definitely agreed with the lifestyle of a younger person, because I was making a lot more money than I should have been at that time, and a lot more money than my contemporaries, who were, you know, struggling, working at Kinko's while taking night classes and things of this nature. And then, you know, all of a sudden I just stumbled onto, oh my God, look at the money I'm making. Holy cow. And of course I'm young, so I could work 60, 70 hours a week, still have plenty of time to go out and do whatever I wanted to do, because when you're young, right, you can stay out till 4 a.m, get 45 minutes worth of sleep, hop up, jump in the shower, and be at work on time, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. That doesn't work as well the older that you get. But at that time, you're running on just pure youth, to be honest with you, because Red Bull didn't exist then.
Yeah. You had coffee
it was coffee. Exactly. Coffee. And if you wanted a change of pace, chai. That's about all you get.
We got a question from Craig.
You could go way back into the 80s and get some rather illicit substances that might get you.
Hey. Let's get back on the righteous path here. Read the question from Craig.
Right. Let me see now. More dangerous to work with, AC or DC? AC or DC? Well, they both have their issues. They both have their challenges. I would say, depending on the voltage, is which one is more difficult to work with, because AC, especially at average household voltage, is 120 hertz. That's 120 cycles per minute. So you're imagining a sine wave going up and down. It cycles at 120 volts. It's 60 cycles per second, 60 hertz. If you become a part of that circuit, the general reaction of the human body is to let go, to push off, and to get away from that. With DC power, which is like a car battery, that generally tends to have a reaction on the human body wherein the muscles contract. And so you can't necessarily will your hands to let go of it. Now, that's very, very basic. There's a lot more involved in it than that, but hopefully that's something that helps on a real basic level. Now, once you start getting into the higher frequencies of electricity on the alternating current side, or the higher voltages, AC voltage definitely becomes more dangerous when you get into that, because it doesn't take much. You can withstand several 100,000 volts. It's not the volts that's necessarily the problem; it's the amperage. And usually,
so what I'm getting is they can both kill me, though.
Yes, they can both kill you. They both have that potential. Now, the average voltages that we deal with between things like car batteries and home outlets and lights and switches, the likelihood of that happening is fairly low, to be honest with you. And there are a lot more protective devices that are being brought into the system. Now, you obviously wouldn't see them for a while yet where you are, the arc fault circuit interrupters and the ground fault circuit interrupters that are required here in the United States, but they're designed for that very purpose, to make sure that any sort of fault condition is shunted back to the source, and the overcurrent protective device activates as it should, rather than the electricity trying to flow through you and find that path back to its source.
So let me show you what the protective devices were when I was a young man. You can tell me whether or not things have gotten better. See this? This is how my family and my parents made sure I didn't die. That little plastic thing, that
plastic
was it.
Plugs.
That was the whole game.
Plastic plugs. My father was in Hawaii many years ago, serving in the Navy. He had a friend who his wife, they just moved into a home, and he said, "Hey, listen, go get those plastic plugs and put them in the outlets." And in his mind, of course, he's thinking, because they had a youngster, and that was the whole idea. Well, what he didn't tell her, and what she didn't know, was their very first electric bill was going to be quite sizable because of the initial cost of starting up the electric service and that sort of thing. Well, he was out at sea, and she called him panicking and said, "This electric bill is unbelievable." He said, Did you buy those plugs like I asked you? And she said, No, I forgot. He said, "Well, there you go. It's running out all over the floor. You got electricity just leaking everywhere." And of course, that's a bit of levity, to inspire a laugh, but that's because electricity is absolute magic to most people, and also because it is invisible. You cannot see it, and yet it can kill you. So it is a lot like magic to a great many folks. You know, and as I talked about earlier, our infrastructure, you know, when it comes to electrical grids and things like that, it's slowly aging. Just because it happened to be next to me here, I have a circuit breaker. Now, the circuit breaker here
you brought a prop.
Is
you
quite
brought
old.
A prop to the show.
I pulled this out of a buddy of mine's place. You can see that, you know, obviously molded plastic, most of it. This is all broken away because it actually there was some arcing that was going on in here, and it melted the plastic. And this was something that I pulled out of a friend of mine's place just a few days ago. Or I want to say probably as many as about 7 or 8 days ago. That this was a top of the line electrical component 60 years ago. You know, and you put 6 decades on any system, it's going to show signs of wear and tear. And this particular model of breaker, actually, they're actually known as being, you know, very solid and having a great lifespan. But when they decide to quit, it is in spectacular fashion. Imagine the guy that won the lottery, walks in, kisses the pretty girl, takes a dump on the boss's desk, and goes, "Hey, I'm out of here." I mean, they'll go with that kind of flair, as it were.
And fair.
Yes, and you know, that's something that people have to worry about, because that's my home. That's in my home. That could burn my home to the ground with me in it, potentially. You know, so there's obviously, you know, there are dangers involved there, but once again, if you know the safety procedures, you know the safety protocols, and how to treat electricity with respect, the odds of you getting injured while working on an electrical system are next to nil. You know, you have higher odds of tripping over your own feet. But having that skill set is something that, you know, it prepares you for that and allows you to do something that most people think is magic. And once again, tying into ancillary benefits, it's a barterable skill set. I go do some work for a neighbor of mine, and then all of a sudden, you know, I need something done on my vehicle. He's an auto mechanic. You know, Uncle Sam likes to have a piece of everything he can, but hasn't quite figured out a way to tax the barter system.
You know, I want to go and show you 2 quick things. One of the things you talked about was something that everyone's afraid of. You know, fire is one of those things, electrical fire, natural fire, where we're terrified of it, as well we should be. And I want to say something I've always advocated, because I'm a prepper and I'm one of those crazy people who sees danger everywhere. Having one of these in the home. Have one of these. Put it someplace where it's easy to get to. They're not expensive. And even if they were the most expensive thing you start a home with, can you really put a price tag on, hey, there was a fire and I stopped it from killing everyone or burning down my house because I had a simple home fire extinguisher?
Agreed. And, you know, people don't realize, especially here in the United States, that, you know, it's usually free to take your extinguisher into the local fire department and have them inspect it. And if it's no good, a lot of them will replace it because they have a stockpile of them, because they can take an old fire extinguisher, discharge it, refill it, and recertify it for a further 5 years.
Didn't know that. That's the jewel. That's the game that everybody had no idea.
Yes. Usually you take that, your local fire department will sort you out for free. You just bring one in.
Wow.
So you have the initial expenditure. Of course, you have to purchase that item. But if you take it in, oftentimes it is absolutely free for them to say, yep, this is the same type. There you go. And we'll take yours, you know, consider it a fair trade, and we're going to discharge it, refill it, recertify it, make sure it has all the hydrostat and you know, that sort of testing and certification that has to go on, and we'll give it to the next guy that comes in.
Wow.
You know, Craig, safety.
Craig, who spoke to me earlier, who asked that question, I want to show everybody, you know, Craig is also one of those crazy preppers like me who tries to make sure things just go well. Craig was oh, what was that?
My apologies. A brief interruption.
Okay. Craig and I sat down and did something called Storm Prepper. And he and I had a great conversation about things that people can do in their homes for just from basic protections. And I hope everybody gets a chance to go back and check that out. You know, you and Craig both have something in common. You both have great personalities for the internet. And I would actually say, you know, it would be really cool to have a YouTube channel called Patrick, the Magic of Electricity. Or no. Maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe it's, you know, Patrick, Electrical Wisdom. You know, we're at that stage in life where we've lived and done and seen so much. We've got some jewels to share with the next generation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I think that they do definitely need to take a lesson. Not that they will, because did we?
Well, we're here though. We're here and we're successful. So
yes, but yeah, some of them, and you know, but how much wisdom was thrown at us that just went absolutely right by us or through our ears. Oh, never mind, old man, you don't know anything. You know, I'm young, I've got this. So you know, you can howl at the wind as much as you want, but it's not down to us. It's down to them. How much are they willing to listen? How much are they willing to glean from us? You know, and that's a tough one. You know, trying to inspire them. Oh, I need a channel, I guess. That's fine. Me and Mike Rowe could hang out and talk about.
You know what? Here's the thing. You never know. Just send them a message and say, hey.
Yeah, true enough.
You know, and you get enough. Here's the thing about my channel. For the people who don't know, I don't make any money off YouTube or Google or ads or anything like that. I just started a channel where I get to talk to really cool friends of mine and talk about a lot of different things. As a matter of fact, I always do my own product placement. I feel awkward with this, my little white collar plug, because everybody watching knows this is what I do for a living. I do editing, proofreading. If you have something written in one language and it needs to be done into university level English, if you have something that needs to be ghost written, if you have a resume that needs to be written, all those things that have to do with the English language. I mean, I coach people who do public speaking, TED Talks. A lot of my clients do things like that. Feel free to contact me here. Anybody can also contact me on LinkedIn and add me there.
You know, I think we should do an experiment. I think that you should write a resume for me to be a talking head on, you know, on a program, you know, a la Mike Rowe, you know, although not having the background in television, but just be able to do, you know, sound bites on the news.
But Mike Rowe, you got to remember, Mike Rowe had it harder than we do. Tomorrow, you and I could sit down and in 30 minutes, you would have a YouTube channel and your first video. It would be so easy, because the trick to it is you don't have to have bells and whistles. I'm sitting here on my, thank you. Kenna, would you just say words instead of doing this?
Listen, don't fight it. The thing is, I think a lot of people don't realize that it's something you told me. You have a natural talent. Obviously, I'm supposed to be doing laundry right now. I'm sitting here listening to you 40 something minutes later after I joined in. So obviously you have a natural talent for this. So don't fight it. Go ahead and do it. Again, don't fight it, just do it. Have it set up tomorrow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, people tell me I have a voice for radio, and the follow-up joke is usually a face to match. But I do enjoy it. It's fun because, you know, having this conversation, this ongoing conversation with like-minded individuals, or even, you know, with people who don't necessarily see the same way I do, but are willing to engage in, you know, an appropriate dialectic and engage in the ancient definition of argument, where people, you know, with differing views, you know, present their sides of the story, not to prove who's right, but to find the truth. And that is the goal there. So I do enjoy it, and I do appreciate that. And on that note, I probably think that I should go ahead and sign off for the time being, and maybe we could circle back and do this again, and maybe include some more subjects that I have absolutely, you know, no background in whatsoever, but I can pontificate for another couple hours anyway.
Remember back in the day we were so smart. Remember when you're young and you're like, we are so smart. We would discuss, and then you grow up and you're like, fuck, dude, like, I'm dumb now, and I'm like okay with that. But man, I remember discussing, and remember the whiteboard, and you would discuss the fifth dimension and dimensional travel.
Yes, yes, indeed. Oh, and I was so clever. Absolutely. You know,
so clever.
Listen, but yet, you know, it's not that way.
Everybody, thanks for watching. And Kenna, I tagged you on Facebook. make sure you share this on your Facebook. Pat, I don't know. I barely see you on Facebook.
I took about a year, maybe a year and change off. I only just recently, about the time of my birthday, got back on. So I'm trying to reintroduce myself to Facebook now. Although I'm not posting a great deal, I'm simply checking up on everyone else. So if you do tag me or hit me or whatever have you, I will see it and hopefully be able to go ahead and share that around.
Gotcha. All right. Well, done and done. And I hope everybody had a great chat with us. I hope if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Love everybody. And you two should see a little, what's it see? Let's see. Oh, thank you. And you should see an end broadcast to tell everybody that, there we go.